Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to the Fallen Protector's 10-man heroic in the Siege of Orgrimmar.
Hello!
Now this encounter's pretty good actually.
Yeah, it's good.
It's very similar to normal mode.
Yes, it is. Well, it's only the heroic version of it pretty much, but they haven't really got a lot of new mechanics, is that they just do their mechanics more often, and in places that they normally wouldn't have done their mechanics beforehand. That's the main heroic change, to be honest, and of course, everything hurts more, so you've got to deal with that. More healing, pretty much.
Now, if you haven't seen our normal mode guide to this encounter and you don't know anything about normal mode, then please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now. That'll take you to our normal mode guide, where you can learn about all the mechanics from normal, so we don't really have to talk about them in depth here. It'll just save everybody some time.
Now for this fight, you want to bring 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers, preferably 3 healers until your healers are ridiculously geared, like maybe later on in the tier or whatever, because you don't really need that much DPS for this fight. The enrage isn't any sort of issue, so the more healers you can bring, kind of the better. And with DPS, just any DPS, to be honest. Ranged DPS is nicer, to be honest, because you can stack better.
Now, the bosses do act very, very similar to how they did on normal mode. However, there's a few key differences that you should be aware of. Not only do each boss hit a lot harder, the bosses will also retain their abilities that they usually lose during a desperate measure phases, and we'll talk about more how this works in a minute. Also, each boss has an additional effect on some of their abilities that it's important you understand as well, otherwise you're going to struggle.
So what we're going to do, we're going to go through boss by boss and talking about what's different, what the changes are, and how you need to deal with it. Now, first off, we're going to talk about Rook Stone-toe. Now, he still has his Vengeful Strikes, which is the stun and then a bunch of punches. So you need to use a CD for this. Of course, it is hitting harder because it's heroic. If you can get out of the stun and move out of this channeled frontal cone thing, then great, but otherwise don't worry too much about it. Healers, you just got to be aware that they are stunned, so they won't be able to dodge any of this shit.
He'll also still do his Corrupted Brew, however this is changed slightly. You still need to move out of it, it will still be thrown at a random player and does like moderate damage. However, every time he casts this ability twice, the travel time of the keg is reduced by 0.5 seconds, and it eventually gets to a point where you cannot avoid the keg at all.
Yeah.
So it becomes quite hard to move out of. Now, the only time this travel time reduction is reset, so like it's not
stupid fast
anymore.
Not
stupid fast and like hitting people instantly, is when Rook Stone-toe goes into one of his desperate measures phases.
To be honest, there's nothing that you need to worry too much about this. If you just do the normal rotation of boss A, boss B, boss C, boss A, boss B, boss C, it doesn't get stupid fast. We actually do have an order for the bosses, which we'll talk about in a little bit, so nothing too much you need to worry about this, but it's good to be aware that it will be landing quicker than normal mode. Now, the boss also has his Clash and his Corruption Kick, which is like the grip and then the spin. This does hurt a lot more now, but the main difference is that he can and he will cast this during a Desperate Measures phase on Heroic. So, because of this, you do actually need to position the boss slightly differently in certain Desperate Measures phases, and we'll talk about that when we come to it.
Now, Rook Stone-toe's Desperate Measures phase hasn't really changed too much. The main difference is that all the abilities from the ads that spawn, it just does far more damage. You need to make sure that you interrupt the bolt. You more or less want to be stacked the whole time because of the circle fire ability, you know, it's like static shock, where it just explodes after so long. You still want to remain stacked for that, and obviously you want to move from any ground slams that come your way.
Now, the main difference on this, on Heroic, and the only difference, is that the ads do have a shared health pool. This means that you can't just nuke down one specific ad, so you can get rid of their mechanic. We didn't really do that for normal mode anyway, but apparently Blizzard thought that was what people would do. So you can't do that anymore regardless. If you have the ads fairly stacked up anyway, you can do some nice cleave and multi-dot sort of DPS, which is really quite good. But the very important thing that you need to do in this phase is make sure that you do remain stacked, and you interrupt every single one of the lightning bolts that you do coming in, because they do a shit ton more damage.
They almost one hit.
They can nearly one hit you, exactly. So make sure you do interrupt that. You might want to set a couple or 3 people on a rotation to make sure that they can get the interrupts on this, because one of them going through can cause a wipe, so just be careful about that.
So that's all the ability changes for Stone-toe. We're now going to move on to his Softfoot. Now, he'll still do his Garrot ability. This just hurts a little bit more. This is just a dot on players. Just keep them hotted, keep them up, don't let them die. He'll still do his Gouge ability on the tank. This will actually stun you for a lot longer than the normal mode.
Yeah, so about 2 seconds longer.
Yeah, so just make sure you turn your back when this comes in so you don't get stunned. However, the changes that have been done to this guy are on his poisons.
Now the main thing that has changed about these poisons is that they will now affect Garrote targets. So say you are going to be taking damage from Garrote, so he's going to target you with Garrote. If he has instant poison on, he'll immediately do 150k damage to you. If he has the noxious poison on, he will then immediately put a pool under you that does 150k damage every second. So what you need to do is, of course if he has instant poison on, you're going to be the Garrote target, you can't do shit about that. There's no time to react or anything. Just healers, you've got to take them straight back up, because of course they're going to be doing ticking damage, and of course damage from all over the fight is coming in. And with the pool, just move out of it. You just really do need to be aware that people, like, it can take you down to like less than half health with a Garrote, a single Garrote, if he has instant poison on, so please do be aware about that. Now, his Desperate Measures phase is exactly the same, except the ad does some more damage. Just keep throwing it to people who can cheese it, or just keep throwing it around further and further away, like people with Cloak of Shadows or Dispersion. We just have like a little cheese like rotation in the
yeah, we just
group.
have players that have really nice cooldowns that can, you know, keep this buff for as long as possible. Now, really, on normal, you can kind of throw this to your tank.
If you're on
you
crack,
probably shouldn't.
You should never do that.
Alex is totally against me on this one, but I think you can throw it to your tanks. It means more vengeance, more damage.
Oh my God.
On heroic, definitely do not throw this to your tanks.
Well, it does reduce your armor to 80% of what it was instead of 50%, so it's like even worse now. So yeah, don't listen to Loz. Never throw it to your tanks ever. So that's it for He's Softfoot. Moving on to Sun Tenderheart, which is the casty lady. She still has her Shard Seer, which is the Mind Seer, so get the fuck out the group, it hurts a little bit more now on Heroic. And she still has a Shadow Word Bane, which is the jumping ticking damage. You do need to dispel this.
Yeah, the quicker you dispel it, the more it won't jump, especially if you dispel it like instantly. It'll actually remove all 3 stacks straight away, whereas if you're a bit slow, it'll only remove 2. I don't know if that's intentional, but that's just how it seems to work. And the thing that's been changed on Heroic is her Calamity. Now this is like the ability that will just deal 30% of everyone's HP like after a short cast. It also dispels any of the Shadow Word Bane buffs, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, it's nice.
Now the change on this ability is that each time she casts it, the next Calamity will remove 10% more of everyone's max HP. So the first one will be 30%, the next one will be 40%, the one after that will be 50, etc, etc, and eventually it will one-shot people. Now, this buff that makes the Calamity stronger and stronger and stronger will drop when she enters the Desperate Measures phase.
Once again, this is something you don't really need to worry about because, of course, you're doing the ABC rotation. So, to be honest, you won't notice it too much. Just be aware that she will be doing extra damage, and this Calamity, she can and will cast this during other people's Desperate Measures phases, which is something she didn't do before. So that's also something. Just be aware that big spike damage coming in, but with the rotation that we use, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, it isn't too much of an issue. Now, her Desperate Measures phase, nothing has particularly changed mechanically about this. You've still got to kill the ads at the side and then nuke down the little ads that come into the middle. You need to be inside the bubble, and the ticking damage is slightly higher. However, as the other bosses are still doing their abilities, so you've got the Clash, which is the main one, and Garrote, which just generally happens, but the Clash is the main thing. Because of this, you really need to position the bosses differently. What you need to do is actually have both bosses tanked outside of the bubble. So both your tanks are going to be on the outside. And as a raid group, you need to be stacked up towards the side of which Stone-toe's in, but still inside the bubble. So you should all be kind of hugging the side of the bubble. This means that when he does charge, he will charge and start spinning outside of the bubble. That means you will be pulled outside of the bubble momentarily, but you can just run straight back in. The only problem is if you're out of position and he charges you, he might actually fill the whole bubble with his spinning crane kick.
Which means none of you can be inside it, none of you get the damage reduction, and yeah, it can become a bit of a mess. You won't necessarily wipe, but you're forced to use healing cooldowns.
So it's just good if you tank each boss and right next to the ads on the side that you need to kill, because you can cleave off of them, which is quite nice, as tanks at least. So otherwise it's fairly simple. It's just that you will have clashes going on during this phase, and that's the main problem with this phase, is just the clashes.
So that's the bosses and all their abilities, really. And to be honest, the only thing that you'll find challenging in this encounter is just that everything is being used in Desperate Measures phases. Like, the bosses don't just become patchwork and do nothing.
Exactly.
The bosses will still do all their other abilities. So you need to really just learn all the mechanics, deal with all the mechanics. It can become a bit of a mess, you know, if you're having to deal with loads of different abilities at the same time. It can become a bit frantic. But generally, that's more or less it.
Now, the order in which we take the bosses into the Desperate Measures phases, it actually is Stone-toe, then it is Tenderheart, and then it is Softfoot. We found that it isn't too bad. Maybe with the Garrote, It isn't too bad waiting all the way until he's the third person to manage so he can get rid of all his garrot things, because it isn't too much of an issue. But if you leave Sun Tenderheart up for too long, without her going into a desperate measures phases, her Calamity will start doing incredibly high percentages, like one hit territory. So we found that it is the most useful if you do Stone-toe, Tenderheart, and then Softfoot. If you do it in that order, and then you do that in that order once more, it shouldn't be too difficult in terms of their abilities becoming too strong.
So to wrap the fight up very, very quickly, you need to get Stone-toe to 66, Tenderheart to 66, Softfoot to 66, do the exact same order again for the 33% mark, and then obviously they all need to die within, 10-15 seconds of each other, otherwise they'll all start rezzing. But it's a very repetitive encounter. It is not that challenging. You shouldn't struggle too much on this. The only people who may struggle is the healers. The HPS requirement on this fight is extremely high, but because you are stacked, it's relatively easy. And the only abilities that sort of force you not to stack are so obvious that you shouldn't really get your raid killed by them. I mean, like Sharseer is extremely obvious. And it's the same with the Jade Kick and with the Keg as well. It's not difficult, but it's still an excellent fight. And fundamentally, it's incredibly important that you understand all the mechanics, or you will struggle with it.
So thanks for watching, guys. If this guide did help you out, then please do give us a like, it helps us out a lot. And make sure to comment, rate and subscribe.
And if you'd like to see other 10-man heroic guides by FatBoss, please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now, and that'll take you straight to those videos.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.